Hello and welcome on behalf of the Visual Effects Society, the Visual Effects Industry's global professional honorary society. We'd like to thank you for joining us for what will certainly be a dynamic conversation on award-winning visual effects teams with several exemplary visual effects supervisors who are on camera at the moment. My name is Rob Legato. I am probably best known for winning a first place in a fishing contest when I was 6 years old in Asbury Park, New Jersey. I guess I won several VES awards, probably why I was asked to do this. All of them are basically being investigated for voter fraud, but right now I still have them. The gentlemen that we're going to introduce, which is Michael Lasker and Alex Wang, are both won VES awards. Michael won Best Animated Feature for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Alex won for The Last of Us, which is really a great show. I think we're going to just start right away with asking some questions. It's kind of little bit about teamwork and what does it take to actually create a team that allows you to realize your vision and the director's vision and the film's vision and produce work that gets you these awards.
First, it's a pleasure to be here and honored to be talking to you, Robert and Alex. I love The Last of Us.
It's the fishing contest thing, isn't it?
Yeah, Across the Spider-Verse. We really had to build a team that was artistically driven. The movie has a real graphic aesthetic. It's different than most animated features. We had already done Into the Spider-Verse and The Mitchells vs. the Machines, so we are starting to get artists that are looking for projects like that. Back when we did the first film, it was kind of new. We had to kind of find our way. With Across the Spider-Verse, we had a lot of artistically driven CG artists that really wanted to be part of the team. So the trick really was building that team with artists and developers that were willing to experiment, to sort of try things out, to not get frustrated if the first version wasn't the right version. With this type of work, you really have to sort of bounce back and forth with visual development, with the directors, and sort of collaborate to find the visual answers. Because, at the beginning, there's a lot of reference, a lot of ideas, but the final look is an exploration and no one really knows. So in this movie, we had 6 total universes to figure out what the final look was going to be. So we really had to find a team that was up to that challenge. And we did. I mean, a huge crew, about 1,000 artists total across all departments. Our biggest lighting and animated teams we've ever had. The coordination between all of those teams was extremely challenging, but it was a team that really yearned for challenges, and we're able to get over those hurdles, and it was really, really exciting.
One of the questions I have about something like that, I witnessed, like for animation projects, the artists would sort of pitch their gags or their ideas or whatever. Is that something that happened on your film? Kind of
Oh,
artist driven?
yeah, I mean, 100%. And that pitching starts as early as visual development, where even the visual development artists are going to pitch ideas to the directors and the producers. And as it travels down the line, once you get to animation and you're infusing performance into the story, it reveals all of these new ideas that no one had thought of. So a lot of times the animators will pitch ideas or show a few different versions of shots. So it's kind of this ever evolving animated process that so many people have their hands in. And
Hmm.
that's why it's one of the movie's biggest strength is you feel that hand of the artist. We say on every frame, it's because we invite ideas, and I think the artists all feel like they have, a real hand in it. And we design tools that can be adjusted shot to shot. So it's not like every shot's going to look the same. They've got the ability to make their own.
Well, it's part of the strength of that particular movie is he's never seen anything quite like it. Mostly because I think it was done in a way that visual effects films are not generally done, because you don't really have the artists pitching their ideas, especially directly to the director and things like that. You have a kind of a set aesthetic that you're trying to maintain and trying to maintain it shot to shot, as opposed to you're looking for the next best great idea, great visual. So that's why it was interesting to me is that, I've never really worked that way. And so I was going to turn over to Alex. You had a thing that was maybe a little more traditional, in the grand scheme of these sorts of films, probably a little more what I'm used to, I think. You want to talk
Yeah,
about your show?
I mean, it definitely helps to start with an IP that many artists love to start with. It's a game that I'm a huge fan of. We had 18 vendors on the show to deliver this project, over 3,000 shots, but it was working on like 9 feature films.
Yeah.
I think it's important with such a big show to really involve our creative partners, our vendors very early on, and as early as prep to help out with concepts. I think that the biggest thing is our creative partners, they just want to get started early and be helpful, right? Whether it's being on set, being an on-set presence, being a part of conversations with our showrunners, conceptually helping establish the look of our brand, the world that we're building. So it's definitely figuring out that balance of bringing everyone on early and just kind of starting that creative process very early on.
I know from my own career, I would always find that when I'm working on these things, I would be continually gauging who is good at what and just
Yeah.
steering shots and things I think these people would be, excel at. And then discovering that even if they didn't excel at one thing, they probably would excel at something else. You're always kind of moving the playing field around. Did you discover the same sort of thing, especially with, was it 14 vendors or something like that?
Yeah, 18 vendors. It's definitely many of the vendors I've had a shorthand with before, so I know certain things that they excel at, whether it be environment or creature work. Um, Both DNEG and Weta being our main vendors, one for environments and one for creatures. So it's definitely catering to what their strengths are, and but also asking what the vendors would like to do on a project like
Mhm.
The Last of Us, where there's a wide variety of challenges. Some are, for example, we had our tendrils, the infection that we've established on the show, a very abstract concept and a very delicate concept as well, as to not making it look sci-fi. It has to look, the whole show needs to be grounded and real, like this could really happen, and if it did, what would it look like? Sort of like we wanted a vendor that was excited as we were, sort of going through those challenges and establishing that creative process.
Yeah, I think I do that too, is where I find who's enthusiastic about one particular portion or another. Sometimes it's because they've never done it before and they would like to embrace something new as opposed to do something that they're kind of known for. And then that usually gets a response that it makes me excited that, let me sort of lead you along in that regard, that you will probably supply the enthusiasm of trying something new, trying something that hasn't been done before. The other thing I notice, one gentleman to talk about, is usually when I'm designing something, I don't really pick the technique at the same time I'm designing it. I wait because by the time the movie gets greenlit or the show gets greenlit, something new has come up
Mhm.
that's when I have to make that call. Is that something similar to you guys? Do you feel the same way, or do you lock it on how you want to do something early on?
I mean, I know with us, we're continually evolving how we're doing it over the whole course of these productions. I mean, a lot of these tools are completely written from the ground up at the beginning, and they're getting optimized, and they're getting new features, and they're getting easier for artists to play with, and there are always these new ideas that come up. So, for us at least, we're kind of always adding to the tool set as we go. And a lot of times the artwork that we get, the target, is not really representative of the final product. It is like references and inspirations. And we found that if we sort of come at come at a challenge from different directions and create different ways of doing it, it kind of adds to like that more naturalistic look, because you're able to
Mhm.
layer different ways, or have one shot use one technique, another shot use another technique, and that way it sort of feels natural. But yeah, always sort of changing and building for us.
And Alex, since you're working on sort of an episodic series where there's the first show, generally they're shot in order, do you notice that things have changed as you are progressing in the show? That you get either good at something or you decide that some sort of technique is maybe better, could be done better in another way? Do you essentially evolve during the course of your series? And the types of effects do you employ?
As a season, because it's the first season of the show, the challenges of establishing that world, both exciting and challenging, just because we're trying to set the tone, we're trying to create the tone of the show. When you're trying to go from video game IP into a show, like a medium as for episodic, and our showrunners really wanted the show to be very grounded, that those expose a lot of challenges. I would definitely from episode 1 to episode 9 for the first season. There are many things that we started to get develop a rhythm in. A lot of sort of abstract natures of how the infected and our creature work, those are being established. Definitely as we went on to later episodes, got easier. But because our show was a journey across America, every episode gave new challenges because it was a different look. It was nighttime, it was daytime, it was snowing, it was springtime, it was summertime. Really, the challenges as we sort of got caught up with what we thought we were good at, the next episode was a brand new challenge.
Funny, that's very similar to my experience on this film. It's like once you figure it out one world, you go to a different one, and it's new challenges, and you kind of get there throughout the project.
And I assume that both you guys worked on other shows that are different. If you worked on a film, it's different than an episodic show. If you worked on a regular visual effects movie with one sort of theme, you're not changing looks all the way through the thing. How is this adapting to this other way of working work for you? How's that come about?
Season 1 was my first show as a production supervisor and first time really diving into an episodic project. So lots to learn there. With a show like this, I think is a lot of things are similar to a feature film. I think the biggest difference would say that is probably the delivery schedule, just how each episode delivers, maintaining that sort of concept of making sure that you got everything sort of geared up. As a show, I think there's still a lot of similarities to feature film.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in live action for a while before I got into animated features, and then doing animated features the traditional way before getting into this more stylistic way, and each of them was a bit different. And you have all these different challenges with shooting and plates and integration with live action, and then movies like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Hotel Transylvania are great projects, but they're definitely more traditionally lit. You build a light rig for the whole sequence, whereas in the Spider-Verse movies and more stylistic, we would have sequences where every shot was a completely different light rig, a completely different painterly look, and you sort of had to throw out a lot of your efficiencies and come up with new ones.
Curious, when you started that, was that the intention from the very beginning? Did it start as a more traditional, we're just going to make an animated version of this film, as opposed to we're going to make it so radically different, even shot to shot or scene to scene?
Yeah, I mean, coming off of the first one, I mean, I just knew they were going to want to do something bigger and crazier than the first film. And I don't think at the start we realized how different every shot would be. I definitely thought we'd be able to leverage our lighting tools and comp tools a little bit more uniformity. But once we started seeing the reference artwork, you started to get the idea. We would get lighting keys for almost every shot on some sequences. So we would have an entire contact sheet of lighting keys to match. And but then we would have other sequences where we could, when Miles in his own universe, we were able to use like one light rig or two light rigs for a whole sequence. So it really depended on the world since they all had their own rules.
Alex, I think on your show too, since you have 18 vendors, did I get the number right this time? 18 vendors. Is there any kind of key that you make up to say, here's the look, and here, even though you may as a company do it differently because everybody has a kind of slightly different workflow, you still have to kind of maintain the same consistency. So you couldn't tell the difference between one company's version of something unless they were so completely different. They did such their own work. Did you have to come up with some sort of like, here's our Bible?
A large part of my job was making sure continuity was there. We helped ourselves by making sure that we didn't divvy up the work in a way where continuity would be a huge issue. So it was actually nice to divvy up. You could even have specific vendors be on specific episodes. And then conceptually, I think the game was always kind of my Bible as to where to go back. Every time I was a little lost as to like what this should look like, there's like a beautiful The Last of Us artwork book from the game that they've created for games 1 and 2 that I have it on my desk at all times, where there are times where in between reviews I would just flip on it just because it's so inspirational, just to like kind of get me back into what was exciting about the show, and making sure that give that energy to our artists.
Interesting. I kind of do the same thing. I always hang up artwork so I can just look at it just for the quick inspiration. So you just have that reference. But it's funny, like we we're just the only vendor. I would have different teams handle different looks. So it's very similar to kind of what you're describing, but like within the same team.
Well,
Yeah,
I found when I was working at a, one particular facility and we did the whole movie, the different sections were later I discovered very similar to working with different companies. They had their own, a set ways of the way they like to do it compared to everybody else. And there was always a bit of a fight, especially back then because everything was brand new. Nothing was tried and true. No one had that much experience in any one software than anybody else. So I found it not that difficult when I started using multiple vendors. Although I prefer kind of keeping it all under one roof. Just makes it easier to communicate. But now that we adapt, did COVID or any of the stuff that sort of comes out of it help or hurt your process? I assume that you guys worked during that particular time frame on the projects.
I mean, for me, I was actually doing the Mitchells vs. the Machines, an animated movie that I'd worked on before Across the Spider-Verse. And right in the middle of that production, we had to go remote. And in the course of a week, we moved like 600 or 700 artists who were on the show home, got their machines set up, and barely affected production. I couldn't believe it. And then production went up. It actually got better, which was really surprising, but that was quite a time, though.
Well, that's what I discovered when I was doing it. Is that my everybody has a different style. So, and mine was I like to go to someone's desk and say, "Show me what you're doing," and then before it gets into the whole evolution of they're gonna send it to I/O, then it's gonna go, and the coordinators are gonna line it up, and then you're gonna see dailies. Be hours would go by. I'd like to nip it in the bud if something needs to be redirected, or I change my mind having seen it, which is part of the mix. So I found that when COVID happened, I would just say, "Let me see your desktop. Let me see what you're doing. Don't send it to I/O. Don't send me a QuickTime. Just let me see what you're doing." I found it very similar to walking over to someone's desk and peering over their shoulder and doing kind of that kind of review. Did you have a similar thing? Alex, do you want to speak to that?
I come from vendors as well. I was at ILM before joining The Last of Us, and I try to treat, even though I had 18 vendors, I tried to work in a way and make everyone feel like everyone's under the same umbrella of The Last of Us. The way that I like to review it was everybody's work kind of got funneled into ShotGrid. When I give my notes and annotations, it immediately got to the vendors and they could see it right away. For me, I have anxiety of when a shot is just sitting there without feedback. I'm in bed and I'm going to sleep. I'm like, there's like that one shot that I have to like feedback on. So I always try to get feedback to the artists as soon as possible. With 18 vendors, and I think given one of our heaviest months, we had 1,000 finals that month. So you can think about the throughput to get to hit 1,000 finals. In order to do that, I just needed a system that kind of worked efficiently.
That is an insane amount of shots in a month. Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
I totally hear you. Like the way you do it, treating them all like one. I mean, that sounds great. I mean, I have the anxiety too. Like I would get up early and go through all my QCs and send out all the QC notes before they even got to the office or got to work, just so I kind of like knew it was out there so they could start.
Yeah.
Do you guys prefer working like, I don't know if you work at home or not. Do you prefer working at home or in the studio environment, going into every day to a place?
I think I'm the last person in Los Angeles who goes to the office 5 days a week. I love the office. Like, I just feel more professional. I like looking at stuff big.
My showrunner, Craig Mazin, he's in the office all the time. So he's very much like me, where we like to be face to face. We hate reviewing stuff over Zoom. I do it with my vendors every day, obviously, because it just has to be that way. I'm in the office right now, and I just enjoy that, just being around people. And just if I have a question for Craig, I can just walk down the hall and grab him and he'll stop by my office.
That's the thing. We always talk about it. Like we have our client reviews and our sweatbox. And then once the meeting ends, everyone just kind of sits there and has another conversation that's off the books. Or you walk down the hallway and I'm with the effects supervisor. We're coming up with ideas, just walking down. And that's where so much of the magic happens and the important stuff is talked about. It's so hard to schedule that.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I mean, I like working from home too, and I sort of got used to it, especially during the COVID things. And most of the stuff I do is on an Avid or it's on Resolve. It's it's a nuke, it's an After Effects. So I sort of need like a little private time to do it. But what I used to like the most is the side conversation. Like, you know what, when I was looking at that shot, you want to try it like this? So it doesn't have, there's not a dozen coordinators writing down and misinterpreting my note. And it's kind of an offhand. It's like, why don't you try this? It's a little bit like directing on the stage. It's like, maybe on that line you want to sit down. It's not like absolutely, he says sit down on this line. It's like you just see how it feels. I usually get better results with that. So I understand that motivation of sort of the side conversation, not the official.
Yeah, there's like a release of stress when the meeting is over, and you can actually be a little more creative.
Yeah.
I remember learning this early on. Like, if I were to stand over an artist at their desk, they would always do way better work if I left and then came back. It's just something about just relieving that stress a little bit.
Yeah, I find that true because if you make everybody relax, we were sort of going back to the theme of the winning teams, is that they're like actors. If you ever direct anything on stage, every actor is different. You can't approach the same person the same way. Some people are, could take criticism very well. Some people don't take criticism at all, and they crumble. And some people like the encouragement, and some people just like cut to the chase. Tell me what you really think. And so everybody have to kind of find your way with everyone. Managing such huge teams, that's kind of a challenge, especially since everybody producer-wise is trying to funnel it into one thing. You have to be the master of all the different personalities to get the most out of them. Can you guys speak about that? Because that's part of the, I'll give you mine, so I'll lead off, is that I always look for somebody way smarter than me. And I don't care what they have done before. I care what I think they can do, because I'm usually trying to do something that hasn't been done before. And so I find the personality that seems like, you know what, you haven't been tested, you haven't been given an opportunity, but I want to give you the opportunity and I want to see you sort of shine here. That's my method. What's your method?
Yeah, for me, that's why I always invite our supervisors to set, because that's where I develop the relationships and I learn about. It's hard to do that over Zoom because you have probably half an hour to an hour to really learn about that person. Usually you're talking about the work. I have my supervisors come to set, or even their supervisors tag along and come to set, just so they can see the process, and I can just have those conversations about work and not about work, just to kind of learn about each other and kind of develop that shorthand. But that's always something that, Rob, I'm looking forward as well. Like, I know everyone that I have on my team is smarter than me, and I always, if I in my background specialize in something, I always try to find somebody that is complementary to that excels in something that I don't know about. So that's how I always try to find the right team.
Yeah, you always want to ask if you don't know. Like, never want to assume that I know anything. Like, go to the expert, right? And we always try to encourage all of our artists to bring their ideas, because that's really the strength of these movies. Most of our workforce is up in Vancouver, so I try to get up there like once a month, depending on the state of production. And you go up there and more artists come in, and everyone comes to the sweatbox and you actually meet them in person. And, a lot of times it's like meeting actors, because I've only seen them on the screen. It's really funny. But, having socials and just getting together, and it makes such a difference. I try to create a creative environment where everyone feels safe to sort of bring their ideas, and there are no bad ideas. And, and I tell them, if you come up with something cool and that everyone likes, the directors like it, it'll show up on the screen. So
that's honestly what makes things good, is that, you have this plan. I want it to be exactly the way I want it until I see something better. And it's like, I want to do that. Let me do that. Let me shift gears really quick. The other thing I learned early on, and maybe you guys do the same thing, I think we all probably kind of come from the same thing, is that I've always said that I don't have all the answers. I just need to get them. So that means that I don't have to show off. I don't have to pretend I know something I don't. And I am not afraid to make a mistake or make an idiot of myself by asking a stupid question like, how does that really work? Because I don't have to pretend I know how it works. I just, you tell me, you know about it. And I could judge pretty well if someone's, full of shit or not. But I want to extract something I look at myself, and maybe you guys feel the same way, is that I'm the lowest common denominator. It can't get worse than what I can do. It can only get better than I can do. So that's what I'm aiming for. And that's sort of my version of creating a winning team is I'll make sure it never goes below this level. It's not a very high bar, but it's never going to go below this level. And I'm always searching for something better. Do you find something similar? Is that a universal quality or is that a individual quality?
I mean, it's such a big part of the job, right? It's empowering people to make big decisions. And I always tell my CG supervisors, I'm like, you see these shots way more than I do. They're working with the artists, they're seeing it maybe 5 times as much as I am, and they actually have more of a hand in how those shots are going to look than me. I really try to go to people because I love to learn. I go to people who know or are experts in certain things like cloth simulations or effects or modeling. If I don't know, but I love to sort of empower people to try to, raise up, nurture, and become, stronger supervisors and artists.
Yeah, I always tell my supervisors on each vendor, give me a bold version. Here's a note, but give me a version, like do something because I'm not seeing every iteration you are. And there might be something where you don't be shy about saying, well, maybe we try this. The worst thing that we can say is it's not a good fit for what we're looking for, but I always ask for them to just be creative and be bold.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Like having them go too far. Because so many
Yes.
times we just sort of
Yeah.
inch along and I'm like, go too far because we'll learn something from it. It may not be what we want, but we like this part of it and we can sort of reel it in, but take what was working from it.
Especially in the beginning, you don't make a small change, make a big change. That's way too far.
Exactly.
You sort of learn over time. It's like if you go this far, then you go back in half, you're already like 2 or 3 steps ahead than having all arbitrary choices in between. It's like go crazy. Okay, that's too crazy, or not crazy enough, and then you get to the finish line faster. I think that way. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about more about your individual projects that we haven't really covered? Your hierarchy, or how you like to work, or what's unique to you? Because I think that's interesting for us. Is like not a generic way of working, but what's your way of working?
What's unique about our show is really our showrunner, Craig Mazin, who's really an incredible writer, but also just an incredible leader. And on a show where really it should be grounded, it should be invisible VFX, even though we have collapsed buildings and it's post-apocalyptic, but it should not take us away from the characters. For him, the most important thing is always about the characters, but he has and always will be the biggest champion for visual effects. He is not shy to say that this looks real, and that's because visual effects did an impossible job and they made it look real. Through that process of approving 1,000 shots in that 1 month, he was there every day, and just being really a part of that process, I think was important, making everyone that touched the show feel special.
Feel they're part of the show.
Exactly.
Their voice counts. How about you, Michael?
I think my main partner in these productions is the head of character animation. And what's really cool about these more stylistic shows is the animation creates a lot of the style and they drive a lot of the style. And we have to come up with ways for it to translate downstream, down the pipeline. So there's a real partnership there for the look of the movie. And then just our team at the studio, I mean, just I'll throw out Tom Rothman's name from the top down. I mean, he got it when they pitched into the Spider-Verse. We did a whole presentation for him very early on back in 2017. And he's like, I get it. And to have a studio behind you, just letting such a huge gamble. Chris Miller, Phil Lord, just unbelievable at sort of driving everyone's creativity, and our directors and production designer. It's such a collaboration, these productions, more so than I think a lot, because you all have to work together to figure out what that is going to look like, what it's going to look like in the end. From top to bottom, just really, really great teamwork. But I thought it was interesting how animation was such a driver of the stylistic look of it. That was kind of a newer concept to me.
Well, I simply never saw anything quite like it. So when you see it, it's like, well, I'm seeing something, brand new. It's not, I can't judge it against anything else I've ever seen because I've never seen it. And ultimately, that's what we go to the movies for. Show me something I've never seen before, or show me
Exactly.
a story being told in a way I haven't seen before. Otherwise, you're replicating somebody else, and that's coming in second. That's not it's not pioneering the work. Not that it's necessarily about pioneering. It's about there's got to be a compelling reason to make it. Why am I telling this story this way? And so that's where you kind of get behind it. I assume, Alex, with your show and your showrunner, you're creating a show that generally you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Those characters, that particular told in that particular style, that the quality of the work, which is extremely high. That's why you won awards, quite frankly. So
Thank you.
so I think that makes it sort of exciting as I'm paving new ground.
And one thing you just said, I completely agree with. I oversee all of our animated projects now at Imageworks, and a lot of stylized work. And I'm always asking, like, what's the motivation for it?
Yeah.
What's the motivation for the style? What artists influenced it? Is it story driven? Um, so I thought that was a really, really interesting point because we're in this world of so many stylized projects and all trying to have different looks and really trying to figure out like what they're really after, what's the core idea.
I gotta say, it's when I was watching Spider-Verse, which I love, by the
Oh,
way. I get anxiety just watching this because, in a good way, because I'm like, I don't know how they did this. The amount of assets, the amount of animation is just really, really incredible.
Oh, I appreciate it. We actually it was the most characters I think we ever had in any movie we ever made it in shorts in like 35 years. Just the amount of assets was insane. We'd have these characters that involved every aspect of the pipeline. So we had like Vulture and Spider Bite, and you have effects and rigging and line work and crazy like backpacks of weapons, and we would have meetings with everyone represented. How are we going to do this? But I just have to say, Last of Us, I loved that show. The look of it was breathtaking. I've seen a lot of breakdowns, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe how much is extended and computer generated, and it looks
mm.
so incredible. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I mean, great work, both of you guys. I think we're getting close to the end. Anything else that you want to touch on?
I mean, I got into this business just to create cool images. I think you
Mm.
were saying that before. It was like that's what really got me going. And I think for any artists out there, just follow your passion and go after what you love, and I think you'll get there. You won't let anyone slow you down.
To tag along with that, I'd say stay enthusiastic. Sometimes enthusiasm is more important than experience, depending on what job we're looking for, and just be hungry and also be humble, right? Sometimes it's all, for me, many times it's personality comes first, especially if we have to work closely together.
Yeah, I learned a couple of lessons early on that I use. Everybody's different, so everybody has their own sort of a bent on it. One of them was a Frank Capra quote, which said that at any one moment, whatever is on the screen is the movie star. So that means that whatever it is important. You're cutting to it for a reason. And then I heard from Connie Hall, who's one of the world famous cinematographers. And when somebody asked him, well, how do you know how to point a camera? And he says, well, it's easy. You point it at the story. So the combination of those two things is you're telling a story. That shot needs to tell a story and have a reason for its being to be in that place at that particular time. So kind of simplifies the work for me is that it has to hit those two marks. It's got to be the movie star of that scene. Even if it's an insert or something subtle, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the complexity of it. In fact, the less complex, the better. What it does have to do is serve a story point, and then I find that usually gets me to a place early on that the shot can be successful or the idea can be successful. And I imagine anybody who does things well uses a variation of that theme. Whether it's individually done, the way I described it or the way you guys describe your work. But, obviously, it's award-winning work. There's a reason for its being. There's a reason why you're the captain of that particular ship. And so that's, I think, when people, a lot of the artists wish to be you at some point, and so they get inspiration by how you guys work and the excellence that you guys create with your teams and also with your individual vision of how to produce something. So I don't know if you want to make a final comment about that because you're actually teaching now the next generation of filmmakers out there.
No, I mean, we like to, just like you said, every frame, every shot is like a painting in the work that we do, and we try to infuse love and care and enthusiasm into everything. And yeah, I think just really follow your dreams, make cool stuff, and just set goals. I think, I remember early on my very first movie, I was a lighter, and it was actually Monster House animated movie. And
That's Zemeckis.
yeah, yeah,
My-
it was the first time we actually had used the Arnold renderer at our studio, and it was one of the first animated movies we did. And there was a VFX supervisor and a DFX supervisor. And I remember at the end, I emailed the DFX supervisor. I'm like, "You have the coolest job. How do I get this job?" And he wrote me back an amazing email, and I just never forgot that. And now I work with him, and it's amazing. And I think just follow your passions, and but set goals. I think that's really important.
And Alex?
Yeah, don't forget that the computer is just a tool, and don't remember the foundations of. I think that's what separates the good from the great, is understanding the foundations of art and photography and lighting, composition. I think we'll never get away from that, and I think just yeah, be a master at your craft, and you can do anything that you want.
Great. So I think with that, we'll close, and thank you very much for sharing your work and your expertise and your essentially your humanity and how you deal with your shows to the next generation of filmmakers. So I think I'll sign off because I don't know what else to say.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Yes, thank you, Rob.